All right, so we're going to try to roll through these muscles, and we're going to go through the insertion, origin, action, and all that business. I am going to kind of use a little cheat sheet to help me guide me. And where can you get this sheet? Oh yeah, from the tutorial lab. And we also have like a skeleton sheet and a skull sheet. Please come and see us. All right, so anyways, bicep brachii. We know what that is. That's going to be the muscle on the humerus. All right. So they could maybe ask it on the cat and they would put it right there. Or maybe they ask it on a muscle model and it would be right there. Now the word cep is short for cephalic. Cephalic means head. So if I have a bicep, that means I have a two-headed muscle. All right. So this right here, it makes me flex. The bicep is going to have me flex the elbow. So I know the action is down here. Remember, wherever the action is, that's the insertion, and it's more distal. And so that's going to be on the radius. All right, I always flex to my origin, so the origin is my scapula. All right, the antagonist to this is going to be the tricep. Okay, the thing about antagonist or whatever is just like, if my bicep is going to be contracted, that means my bicep, my tricep, the opposite muscle, it has to be relaxed. That's all that means. It's kind of like the yin and yang. And so the tricep, if I were to contract it, I would extend the elbow, right? And so here's all the action. So that's where the insertion is. Insertion, action. And so that's going to be on the ulna. If I were to get really sticky, I would say olecranon process, right? That's how, so like here's the process. It's an overgrowth of bone on the ulna. This is the olecranon process. All right. While we're talking about processes, I just want to throw out this gem, coronoid process. Do you need to know that? Yes. Yes, it's on the mandible. All right. So anyways, tricep is a three-headed muscle. It's inserted on the olecranon process, also known, just you can put ulna, that's fine. This is my rule, not a real rule, all right? I should like emphasize that. So if I always like to say, if I have 3 or more heads on a muscle, I have 2 origins. If I have 3 or more heads on a muscle, I have 2 origins. And so this is tricep, a 3-headed muscle. So it is going to originate on the scapula and the neighbor, which is the humerus. By the way, when I have 2 origins, I go way up high and then to the neighbor, okay? So the tricep is going to originate on the scapula and the humerus. So the cool thing about the bicep and the tricep is that they both originate on the scapula. Cool. You just have a little extra with the tricep. You have to know it's the scapula and the humerus. All right, no big deal. All right, next one we're going to go over is the digastric. So we're underneath the mandible and it looks like 2 triangles, all right? Maybe they do it on the cat. Maybe they ask it on the model, okay? Think about that word digastric. Di means 2, so I like to think of the 2 triangles. And then gastric, hopefully you think of stomach, right? How do you get food down to your stomach? You have to lower the mandible, right? Yeah, which I love to eat, so I love to use my digastric, absolutely. Got to lower the mandible and get that food down to my stomach. So here's the deal. The action is to lower the mandible. Where is inserted? The mandible, because that's where the action was. All right, but it originates back here, which is going to be, and let's point it out on the skeleton. That's this right here, and I hope you all don't get dizzy with our homemade film, but this right here, which feels like a wad of gum behind your ear, is the mastoid process on the temporal bone. So the digastric is going to insert on the mandible, but then it originates on the mastoid process. The action is to lower the mandible so I can get food down to my stomach. The opposite of that is going to be the masseter. All right, so they wouldn't ask this on the cat, okay? And they probably wouldn't ask it on this dude, but who knows? I never know what they're going to do. So the masseter is just a band of muscle that helps us raise the mandible. It helps us raise the mandible. So if we raise the mandible, the action is at the mandible, so it's inserted on the mandible. Masseter, inserted on the mandible. It originates on the zygomatic arch. So actually, this is the zygomatic arch, okay? And it's going to insert on the mandible. When we talk about the zygomatic, it is a process. So you have the zygomatic process from the temporal bone and you have the zygomatic process from the maxilla, but when they're together, it's considered as the zygomatic arch, okay? Now, keeping the mandible closed and fighting gravity actually takes a little help. It's called a synergist. Synergist muscle is like, it's fancy for help, and that's going to be our temporalis. If I'm looking on this model, that would be this guy right here. It's on the temporal bone. So it originates on the temporal, but since it's helping us keep the mandible up, where is it inserted? I know you said mandible. I know you thought mandible. You are right. Wherever the action is, that's where it's inserted. And so the temporalis is actually inserted on the mandible. All right, but it originates. All right, next thing is going to be our quadricep group. All right, so quadricep, let's think about that. That's 4 for quad, and then cep is short for head. So it's a 4-headed muscle. And so this is composed of 4 muscles. They might ask you, like, what 4 muscles make up the quadriceps, right? Well, you're gonna know it. So I like to say hot dog. Like, I think of my big hot dog, all right? Don't get crazy on me, but vastus, like vastus fastus. All right, yeah, we like it all. So vastus means big. If you think of Latin, so like my vast assortment of chocolates and stuff like that. So I have a big bun. I got a vast bun. By the way, you got to take a look at this. So, by the way, I have to move the Sartorius. Doesn't that look like a hot dog? Yes, it does. Use your imagination. Don't play with me. So this is a hot dog. We got our bun and we got our wiener. All right? So, yeah, you can laugh about that. So we got our big bun, and we call this vastus lateralis, vastus medialis. Let's move our wiener, vastus intermedius. So vastus, vastus, vastus. And then we think of where we're at. Vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, vastus intermedius. I-N-T-E-R, enter, means in between. Okay? Little digression, but let's look at the skeleton. I have these holes that are in between the vertebrae. Those are called intervertebral foramen. So in between the vertebrae, there's a hole, because foramen means open hole. So intervertebral foramen. Right here, this blue disc, that is the intervertebral disc. All right, but if I was talking about these muscles down here, the one in between would be the vastus intermedius. Now, what do we know about wieners? They all like to be erect. All wieners like to be erect. Okay, so in Latin, erect or rectus means straight. If you look really close, you'll see that straight line fiber. So that's why this is known as rectus femoris. Let's look on here. You see that straight line fiber line? Rectus femoris, because it's a straight line. All right, so if we think about your hot dog, and don't be weird on me, but a big bun with a straight wiener. That's all it is. All right, now we have to talk about origin insertion. So let's look at the action. The action is to extend the knee, and that contracts my quadriceps. All right? So up here, there's no movement. So I know my origin is here. More distal is my insertion. That's down here. So it's a 4-headed muscle. How many origins do I have? 2. Because I said if I have 3 or more heads, I'm going to have 2 origins. So right here is the ilium. That's 1 origin. And then I go to the neighbor, which is the femur. So the quadricep is going to originate on the ilium and the femur. Down here, the action, that's my tibia. So it's inserted on my tibia. Okay? The antagonist to this is going to be my hamstrings. All right? If you look on the cat, this is going to look weird. Like, this is the front of the cat leg. This is the back of the cat leg. All right? So this right here is 1, 2, 3. There are 3 hamstrings. I like to say semi-hemi because that helps me remember that this is a semimembranosus. How do I remember that? Semimembranosus is most medial. I play off that M. Semimembranosus is most medial. Then I got my tender-hearted middle child. That's semitendinosus. Semitendinosus, right here. Then the big boy in the back is the bicep femoris. Bicep femoris. So 3 muscles make up my hamstring. If I look at this model, this is a little bit more difficult to discern, but maybe they would ask the bicep femoris because that one's a little easier to identify. It's most lateral and it's big. So the bicep femoris is always most lateral and out, and it's very big. most medial, semimembranosus, and then my little middle child, my semitendinosus. Semimembranosus, semitendinosus, and bicep femoris. Now, the way I remember my hamstrings as far as action, insertion, and origin, I say, ham it up, right? Ham it up. So it is flexion of the knee. Now, remember that you always flex to your origin. Is there any bone called an ass bone? No. All right. So my origin, I'm flexing to my origin, is my ischium. You know, maybe you could tell your kids to get off their ischium and go do the dishes, right? The ischium is what you sit on. So that's the origin. And then remember, my action is all this down here, right? It is inserted on the tibia and the fibula. The tibia and the fibula, that's the insertion. Okay? All right, moving on. What's our time?
10.
10? You want to stop? Did you stop?